Well, hey there, and welcome back to Heimler's History. Now, we've been going through Unit 3 of the AP Government Curriculum, and in this video, we're going to talk about the balancing act between individual freedom versus public order. So if you're ready to get them brain cows milked, well, then let's get to it. So here's what we're trying to do in this video. Explain how the Supreme Court has attempted to balance claims of individual freedom with laws and enforcement procedures that promote public order and safety. So the idea here is the same as what I've said in nearly every other video in Unit 3. None of our rights are absolute, and when the Supreme Court takes up the task of interpreting the amendments, they are always trying to figure out whether an individual's freedom should be upheld or whether public safety and order is more important. So in order to illustrate this tension, we're going to look at this debate with respect to the 8th Amendment, the 2nd Amendment, and the 4th Amendment. So let's begin with the 8th Amendment, which says this: excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. And we're going to focus on that last clause about cruel and unusual punishment. In recent history, the debate over the 8th Amendment has been waged over whether the application of the death penalty is a violation of this amendment's protection against cruel and unusual punishment. Now, to be fair, the government putting a convicted criminal to death is not on the surface unconstitutional. After all, the Fifth Amendment states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So, according to this clause, someone could be deprived of their life if the due process of law was followed. But unfortunately, in the real world, it's not that clean. For example, in the non-required case of Furman v. Georgia in 1972, the Supreme Court ruled that the death penalty was unconstitutional. Now, different justices gave different rationales for this decision, but one of the overriding themes was racial prejudice in the application of the death penalty. For example, a study from 2019 found that roughly 50% of murder victims are black, but 80% of new death penalty sentences were imposed when the victims were white. And if you didn't follow that, let me explain it up real simple for you. You are way more likely to get the death penalty if you kill a white guy than if you kill a black guy. And it was because of that disparity that the death penalty was deemed cruel and unusual, not because of the methods of execution, but because of the unequal application of it. And because of similar findings in the 70s, that's why the court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional in Furman v. Georgia, which essentially brought the death penalty to an end in the United States. However, the court decided differently 4 years later in another non-required case, Gregg v. Georgia in 1976. After the Furman case, Georgia, along with many other states, rewrote their death penalty laws in an attempt to avoid the racial discrimination which made the death penalty cruel and unusual. And in this case, the court ruled that the death penalty in and of itself was not a violation of the 8th Amendment because for extreme crimes an extreme penalty was required and thus may serve as a preventative for citizens committing those extreme crimes. However, some have argued that there is no humane way to execute another person. Like, not to be too graphic, but there have been occasions when people have caught fire in the electric chair or who have been in agony when lethal injection drugs have been administered wrongly. Moreover, here's where I blow you mind and tell you that in 4 states, it's still legal to be executed by firing squad. What? Like in 2010, a man was executed by firing squad in Utah. 2010! Like, we're not talking about the Old West here. 2010! Anyway, between these two cases, you can see the debate between individual freedom and social order. In the Furman case, the court upheld individual freedom with respect to cruel and unusual punishment. But in the Gregg case, the court upheld social order when it said that the death penalty can be a deterrent to future crime. And look, that debate continues today. Recent evidence has shown that at least a handful of people have been wrongly executed in the past, and attorneys have made use of DNA evidence to obtain the release of inmates who were on death row who were found to be innocent despite their conviction. So this is a very nuanced and hairy topic that will continue to be debated into the future. Okay, now let's consider that same debate with respect to the 2nd Amendment, which concerns, of course, the right to own guns. At various times in various places, laws have been passed which either open up people's right to own guns or seek to constrict those rights. And in general, this is an ongoing debate, but it gets very loud, not surprisingly, every time there's a mass shooting. For example, in 2012, the deadliest mass school shooting occurred at Sandy Hook Elementary in Connecticut. In that shooting, 20 children and 6 adults were killed, and as you can imagine, the public outcry was swift and severe. The gunman used several guns, some of them with high-capacity magazines, and within hours of the shooting, anti-gun interest groups were lobbying Congress for gun control legislation. Over the next few days, President Obama fired off several executive orders to try to restrict gun access, especially those with high-capacity magazines. And clearly, these things were being done in order to uphold public safety at the expense of personal liberty with respect to gun ownership. But on the other side, the National Rifle Association, while they denounced such violence, blamed the incident on the gunman's obsession with violent video games. Like, it wasn't the guns, it was the video games. And so the NRA began counter-lobbying to uphold individual liberty with respect to gun ownership. Now, the Supreme Court has generally ruled in favor of individual gun rights, and I have a whole video on that in the landmark case, McDonald v. Chicago, so that's all I'll say about it here. Okay, now let's talk about this debate between individual freedom and public safety with respect to the 4th Amendment. The 4th Amendment protects citizens against unreasonable searches and seizures of their property. Warrants must be secured before before entering a person's home, and those are only issued by courts when probable cause is well established. And that's pretty clear. Like, the police cannot enter your home and rifle through your stuff without a court approving the action. But the most recent ongoing debate has to do with our rights to be secure in our digital lives. So after the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001 and the resulting Patriot Act, George W. Bush initiated by executive order a program that allowed the federal government to interface with third-party cell phone carriers to search for leads on suspected terrorists. They did this by mining and searching through Americans' metadata, which, in case you don't know, is all the information about how a person communicates minus the actual conversation. So metadata tells us who you called, how long did you talk, how frequently did you call, etc. And under the Patriot Act, this was deemed necessary to the upholding of public safety because we had just suffered this devastating terrorist attack. And while nobody wanted to suffer another terrorist attack, many groups fought back against this invasion of privacy, calling it a gross government overreach and a violation of the individual freedom protected in the Fourth Amendment. Okay, that's what you need to know about Unit 3, Topic 6 in the AP Government Curriculum. If you need help getting an A in your class and a 5 on your exam in May, then click right here and grab a review packet. And if this video helped you and you want me to keep making them, then you can let me know that by subscribing. Heimler out.